This took place about 4 years ago when I was a sophomore in college. I lived with my boyfriend and his parents at the time, as my parents had just gotten separated and neither of them wanted to take me. It was a very sad and upsetting time in my life. Leaving your family that had taken care of you ever since you were a kid, only to end up never seeing them again. It was hard to say the least, and I wasn't doing well because of it. I won't bore you with too much detail, so I'll just get straight into the point. One day during the middle of summer, my boyfriend was out while both his parents were attending a work company event. Since I had the house to myself, I pretty much just laid around doing nothing until someone came home. I rarely got any time to myself around here, so I cherished this time deeply. For most of the afternoon, I stayed in my room watching Netflix with my cat, minding my business. Then at around 9 p.m., I go into the kitchen to make dinner. Now, in the kitchen, there's a big sliding glass door that leads out into the backyard, and the lights are almost always off. With me having constant paranoia, I always turn on the light thinking that someone is out there watching me. Looking back, I know it sounded stupid, but paranoia is no joke. It's kind of like pulling the shower curtains back when using the bathroom, thinking that someone is hiding there, and the one time you didn't do it, someone would be there. Without hesitation, I flip on the outside light, and standing there about 10 feet away is a man I had never seen before. He was tall and lanky and looked to be in his early 30s. I fell back in horror as I saw craze in his eyes. All of a sudden, he then reaches behind his back and pulls out a wrench we keep in our garden shed. I sprinted toward my room, grabbed my phone, and called the police. They said that an officer would be over soon and that I should just hang tight. All the while, I could hear him hitting the glass door with the wrench, afraid it would shatter at any second. I kept my cool, and the sound of the police sirens in the distance was music to my ears. Long story short, the police went in the backyard and arrested the man while trying to restrain him. Turns out, this guy had only lived a few blocks away with his mom, who had been taking care of him. His mom said that he seriously messed up and was forced to go on strict medication but didn't mean to break in. When my boyfriend's parents got back, the officers gave us the option to press charges. Seeing the sad look on the mom's face, we all felt terrible and decided not to do it. I've never seen him since, and I hope he's getting the help he needs.
When I was a freshman in college in October of 2018, a guy I'll call Ron Jones stalked me. I met Ron through one of our mutual friends, Chris, because they were in a school club together. When I met Ron, I thought he was kind of strange, but he was nice and seemed interesting. He claimed to be Slavic and had an accent to back that up. I just thought he might be weird because of cultural differences. I go to school in a rural, southern area, and I figured the cultural shock between here and wherever he was originally from was a lot to handle. Anyway, we exchanged numbers and texted infrequently for a couple of weeks. On October 3rd, 2018, a friend of mine and I went to a drag show on our campus. We weren't out super late, but it was dark when the show ended, and we began walking back to our dorm. I'd been texting Ron a bit during the night because he was unable to get a ticket to the drag show, and he wanted to know how it was. At some point in the conversation, I mentioned that I wanted to grab some orange juice on the way back to my dorm. Don't know why I mentioned that to him. I think I was just making some conversation. My friend and I stopped in a convenience store near our building so that I can get said orange juice, and Ron was already there. He said something about buying the juice for me, and I thanked him, but declined. He got kind of mad and started to walk away, which was odd to me, but I just let it go. My friend and I walked out of the store, and I saw that he was standing outside. Our dorm was actually right across from the building the convenience store was in, so he saw us enter the building. My friend and I parted ways, and I walked up to my dorm room, which was on the second floor of the building facing the convenience store. I kick myself for doing this now, but I went to my window, opened it, and yelled down to Ron when I saw that he was still standing there. I apologized for declining his offer to buy the juice for me because I felt like I had been rude. He stood below my window and started talking to me about random stuff, and at one point, he said something that was odd. He was like, "Can I flirt with you? I enjoy doing that." And I just laughed and said, okay, because I had no clue how to respond to that, and I just figured that he was flirtatious. Stupid, I know, but that's not the dumbest thing that I did. I ended up going outside to sit and talk to Ron for a little bit because I felt bad for being rude earlier. While we were outside, he didn't say anything of note, and he was acting pretty normal. It got cold out, so he asked if he could go inside to talk. I told him sure. At this point in the year, I'd had several guy friends over to my room just to work and chat, so I didn't see an issue with it, and things started out normally, but they quickly got scary. Out of nowhere, Ron basically turned into a different person when we were alone in my room. He stopped blinking, he held eye contact super intensely, and he was laughing in this really low, creepy way. On top of that, his Slavic accent disappeared. That's when he told me that he had lied about being Slavic, and he's native to the state our college is in. He got increasingly more creepy, and there was nothing I could do about it because I had a single room my freshman year. At one point, he grabbed me in a hug and wouldn't let go of me until I said, "Let go of me, right now," 3 times or so to him. He told me that he'd done a lot of bad things, and that if I wanted to put him in jail, he would give me the names of people who have evidence against him. He said he hates Jews and blacks, and everyone until they give him a reason not to hate them. He said a lot of weird, nearly sexual stuff to me as well. Like he went on and on about how showering alone isn't fun, and that it's better with another person, and that he'd be willing to do that if I wanted to. He even said he'd go after me if he weren't dating someone, which freaked me out. He asked if he could sleep in my room, and I said no, and I used that to tell him that I was ready for bed, and that he needed to leave. As he left, he said, "Do you want to know how unsecure the locks on your door really are?" He also pulled out a few IDs out of his wallet, all with different names. I closed the door on him and looked through the peephole. He stood there looking at the door for an uncomfortably long time before leaving. After that, he called me multiple times throughout the month, always at weird times. He started appearing everywhere I was around campus. The friend who had introduced us, Chris, actually started walking everywhere with me because he noticed Ron would follow me around, lurking around every corner when I couldn't see him. Apparently he was around me a lot more than I realized because Chris began carrying a knife whenever he went to places. Ron was everywhere, and he would come up to me and put his arm over me, whisper stuff like, "We need to talk," whenever he saw me. For a while he would lurk outside my dorm, but that stopped all of a sudden one day. I later found out that Chris had told my RA about Ron, and that he had been banned from my building. I hadn't done that stuff myself because I thought I was overreacting. I really wasn't. I blocked him on my phone, and he hasn't contacted me since. He did apologize to me one day on campus last semester when we ran into each other, and I was actually willing to accept it and move on until recently. So here I am, 2 years later, and everything that happened with Ron has come back up again. I found out recently that he has a history of stalking women, like an extensive history of going back to at least 5 years. I met another victim of his who he stalked before coming to my university. She had gone to community college for a little bit, and he stalked her while he was also a student there. He followed her to our university after apparently being suspended from the school after 3 separate stalking incidents were linked to him. The victim I met told me something worrying. Ron is currently an RA on our campus, and she was one of his residents. When she told the residential office that Ron had stalked her in the past, They told her all they could do was have her move dorms, which she did. They then said that they couldn't do anything to discipline him because the stalking didn't occur at our university. She and I both reported our experiences with him to the residential office, who then tipped off the campus police, who then spoke to the dean of students. The thing is, though, when I gave his name to the residential office, they had no idea who I was talking about. He'd even given me a fake first and last name, and I had to do a lot of searching to find out his real name. I knew he was sketchy when I saw the 4 separate IDs in his wallet, but I didn't even think he'd given me a fake name when I met him. After talking to residential living, I talked to the police. When I talked to the police, they didn't seem to care about what I had to say. Actually, the officer that I spoke to talked over me while I was explaining the times he followed me, and said that he'd heard all he needed to hear. I spoke to the dean of students, who asked me some clarifying questions about the police report he'd received. The police had mixed up several details of my story with the stories of other victims. Apparently more people than just myself and the girl that I met have come forward with information about this person. There are even reports that he got physical with 2 separate people before coming to this university. Last week I saw him on campus. He's still an RA, even though multiple women have spoken to higher-ups about his behavior. If I hear from him, I'm issuing a no-contact order to ensure that he stays away from me. Right now, though, that feels like too much of a hassle because we're all going home for a 2-month break due to COVID education anyways. That's kind of it. It's pretty anticlimactic, and there's no sense of justice in all of this. But hopefully this story teaches you all to stay on your toes, and not to think that you're overreacting when someone is being sketchy. Stay safe out there, guys.
This happened to me when I was 17 years old at the time, and is by far the most horrifying thing that I've ever encountered. It was the summer of 2017, which meant that school had been out for a good 3 months. Even though most people thought of summer as the perfect annual vacation, my parents still made me find a summer job. As much as I didn't like their rule, I had to stick with it. I was living in a very small and secluded area at the time, so there weren't many openings around my town. The small band of jobs that were still hiring either denied my application or claimed that they weren't hiring anymore. Eventually, I ended up getting a job with my neighbor who had been living in my neighborhood for a few years now. Her name was Samantha, and she had been a resident in the area for well over 10 years. She was tall and wide and had long brown hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, if anything a bit odd, but agreed to hire me to work around the house. It wasn't the best job, but she was willing to pay me substantially more money per hour than a regular job, probably because I was younger. All I had to do was go over to the house and clean up anything that was laying around. While it may have seemed easy enough, she had made a few rules that seemed a little odd to me. I didn't mind the majority of them, but one of the rules in particular was not to go down in the basement for any reason. What made it even more strange was that her basement door even had a sign on it and made it obvious she didn't want anybody down there. I wasn't the type of person to go into other people's business, but it was very sketchy to say the least. Samantha had left for work and told me that I could leave whenever I was done with everything. There really wasn't much around her house for me to clean, so I just started wiping down furniture to act like I was doing something productive. As I'm organizing a few things in her office, I walked past the basement door and took a good look at it and knew I had to do it. I didn't know what laid beyond that door, but curiosity got the best of me, and I decided that I wasn't leaving until I knew for sure. I ever so casually opened the door into the basement and was met with a blast of extremely cold air and sudden darkness. I felt around for the light switch, but wasn't able to. So I take out my phone and use my flashlight to light my way down the stairs. When I reached the bottom of the basement, I shined my light around the room and noticed what appeared to be chains on the floor and several drawings on the wall. Other than the chains lying on the floor, there really wasn't much in the basement other than the water heater and a few boxes. I then came to the conclusion that there wasn't anything in here, and I turn around to walk back up the stairs when I hear something fall over on the other side of the basement. Not hesitating, I turn on my flashlight and walk over to where I heard the noise. When I saw what it was, I really didn't know what to think. There were at least hundreds of small Legos scattered all over the concrete floor. But before I was able to leave, I heard the sound of a small child in the pitch-black basement. In the heat of the moment, I didn't know what I was feeling inside of me. I guess you could say I was too scared to even feel anything. I ran out of that basement and up the stairs and out of that house, not bothering to close the basement door. I walked all the way back to my house while trying to process as to what the hell just happened. When I got home, I took a nap and my phone was off. When I woke up, I turned it on and, to my shock, I received 20 plus text messages along with 6 voicemails that she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all just insane texts that ranged anywhere from, "Did you go into the basement?" to, "I told you to stay the hell away from there." Thankfully, she didn't know which house I lived in, so I didn't bother responding. I still don't know if what I heard in the basement was just all in my head or something completely paranormal. Either way, I sure as hell won't be going back to that house to find out.
I was a sophomore in high school. We hooked up once. We didn't have sex, just third base. It was whatever, and he left. I was like, I'm not even interested in him. We didn't speak after that. But several months later, I went to this event for this rap group where they were doing a signing, and I'm standing in line with my friend. He comes up to me out of nowhere and is like, "Oh, you're not talking to me anymore? Is that how you really feel?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, but don't think anything of it." Then he started Facebooking, messaging me all the time, like, "Hey, how are you doing?" For the longest time, I didn't respond to him. I don't know why I didn't go ahead and just block him. I feel like blocking is such an extreme measure. I always feel like I don't want to block someone, and I know that I shouldn't be that way, because if you're harassing me or making me feel uncomfortable, I definitely should block you. At this point, it has been 2 or 3 years. I was getting frustrated with his constant messaging, so I just told him, "What do you want from me?" He said, "Oh, I'm going through names in my phone, and I came across yours. I just want to connect with you once again. There's a lot of things going on in my life, yada yada." I was like, "I just really don't care." In a nicer way, he was just like, "Oh, just give me a chance. Can I set up a time to talk to you?" At this point, I realized that he didn't get it, so I just deleted him as a friend so that he couldn't message me. This was before Facebook allowed you to message people you weren't friends with, but he was relentless. He found all of my social media profiles, my Instagram, Tumblr. I have 3 different email accounts for different purposes, and he found all of them, would send me creepy, weird emails. He would also use capital and lowercase letters like a ransom note spelling out, "Can we meet? Can we talk?" I just ignored them. So years later, I had moved. I'm walking down the street, and I see someone coming down my neighbor's doorstep and going to my house. I'm thinking maybe it's someone selling candy, or maybe a Girl Scout. I was ready to be like, "Snap, don't solicit in front of my house." So I walked up with all the authority like, "Can I help you?" And then I see that it's him. I froze. He seemed nervous, so I was nervous as well. All I could say was, "It's been 6 years. How do you even know where the fuck I live?" I was so scared. The one thing that I do remember clearly was him saying, "You're the only person who I can connect with." Mind you, we only knew each other for 1 week in high school, and here he was, 6 years later. He had been ringing doorbells asking for me. It was very unlucky that I was coming home when he was walking up. At that point, I had confirmed for him that I lived there. I really didn't know what to do, so I'm just there, awkwardly smiling at him. That smile that's like, I don't want to anger you, but I'm also not okay with this situation. He then asks me, "Can I get your number?" And I literally don't know what to say or what to do. I didn't want to upset him, so I just said, "Well, it's not really a good time." He just kept pushing me. He was like, "Well, we can talk later. Maybe you can tell me a good time." He had his flip phone with the number taped on the back, and he just gives me that number. I did type it down because I was like, I'm just giving this to the police. He kept talking to me, but I just backed slowly into the house and then closed the door. I was really shaken up. I started crying. I called the police, and they took a statement, said that they couldn't even really help me because he hadn't physically threatened me. The very next day, I had an appointment with my therapist. She confirmed that he had definitely crossed a line, which I needed to hear from someone. When I got home from therapy, my brother told me that my stalker was sitting on the porch, just waiting for me. So then my brother blamed me. He told me that I should have been more forceful, and that I was just too nice. But that's so easy for him to say as a man. Women are taught that they have to be nice. But sometimes when you're not nice, and you are forceful, you get killed, or shot, or stabbed, or even kidnapped. Men's egos are so fragile that getting rejected is the equivalent to justifying taking your life, or severely hurting you. My brother had stepped in at this point. My stalker hasn't contacted me since. I still hope that it's completely over, but I hate that my brother says, "Go away," and then he does, when I've been telling him that I wasn't interested for many years. Either men and boys really don't give a fuck because they think even when you say no, you really mean yes, or he's not gone unless another man steps in, and both of those situations are hard pills to swallow. I mean, there are times where he would even wait for me, or at least I think he would be waiting for me. He was sort of parallel walk next to me. A lot of times, during those years, I would even notice that he would be in a crowd of people, or he'd be on the other side of the room, just staring at me back then. It really did creep me out. You know, the scariest feeling is when you feel like you can't tell anyone, because they'll think that you're just freaking out over absolutely nothing, and you feel unsafe about everything. The social media lurking can grab you sometimes. It's just another reminder that they are constantly watching you no matter what you do. During all of this, I had so many moments that would slow down, and you just can't believe it, but it's still happening right in front of you. I just hope that somebody learns from my mistakes and doesn't let this drone on like I did.